My name is Laurel Maddox, and I'm 31 years old. 8 days ago, I stood in the back of a funeral home in Columbus, Ohio, and watched my mother get buried in a dress she never would have chosen for herself. My stepfather picked it out. Ivory silk, structured shoulders, pearls. My mother wore flannel to dinner and kept her hair in a braid. She would have hated it. But he was her husband of 3 years, and I was just the daughter from her first marriage, and nobody asked me. 4 days after the funeral, we sat in an attorney's office and I watched him inherit everything. The house in Bexley, 4 bedrooms, the garden she'd spent 15 years building from clay soil into something extraordinary, transferred to him. Her savings, $340,000, transferred to him. 60% of Maddox Home Goods, the company she'd built from a kitchen table and a loan from her own mother, valued at approximately $4.2 million, transferred to him. And 2 days after that he called me while I was still in Columbus, still sleeping on an air mattress in my cousin's guest room, and said 8 words I keep turning over in my head like a stone. You should start looking for somewhere else to stay. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Not where he could hear me. Because my mother was a woman who read every contract twice. And I was starting to remember something the attorney had said at the end of the will reading. Something he'd slid past quickly while my stepfather was already smiling. Subject to the terms of the operating agreement filed with the state of Ohio. My stepfather had been nodding at his phone when the attorney said it. I don't think he heard it at all. The funeral was on a Tuesday. 200 people came, which surprised me and then didn't. My mother, Kathleen Maddox, was the kind of woman who remembered your birthday and your kid's name and what you'd ordered for lunch 3 years ago at a conference in Cincinnati. She'd built the company that way too. Personal, careful, nothing left to chance. I stood at the grave next to my Aunt Bev, my mother's older sister, the one who'd driven 12 hours from Savannah without being asked. Who'd shown up at my cousin's apartment at midnight with a rotisserie chicken and a bottle of wine because she said grieving people need protein and something to hold. She's 63, loud in the best way, and the only person in my life who will tell me the truth even when I haven't asked for it. She squeezed my hand at the graveside. He didn't even cry, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I was watching my stepfather accept condolences from people who didn't know him well enough to see what I saw. The way his jaw relaxed when the attorney mentioned the estate value. The way he pulled out his phone before we'd even left the cemetery. The attorney's name was Douglas Petrie. He'd worked with my mother for 6 years, soft-spoken, organized, the kind of man who uses tabs in his binders. When he said subject to the operating agreement, he'd caught my eye for just a half second. I didn't know what it meant then. I filed it away. Day 1 after the will reading, my stepfather changed the garage code. I found out because I went by the Bexley house to get the last of my things. Boxes of my mother's letters. Some of her recipe notebooks. A painting she'd done in her 30s that she'd always told me was mine. The code didn't work. I knocked. Nobody answered. I called him. He picked up on the 4th ring. I had the security company reset everything, he said. I wasn't comfortable with the old codes floating around. My mother's things are in there. Her things are my things now. He hung up. I sat in my car, in the driveway of the house where I'd spent every Thanksgiving for 15 years, and I didn't move for a long time. Aunt Bev called me that night. I told her what happened. He handed the code. Her voice went flat. The day after the reading. Yes. Laurel. A pause. That man didn't even bring flowers to the service. I know. What did Petrie say at the end? When he was reading the business provision, you said there was something. I told her, subject to the operating agreement. She was quiet for a moment. Your mother was the most deliberate person I have ever known, she said. She wrote 4 drafts of her Christmas cards. She did not leave things to chance. Another pause. Have you called Petrie? I hadn't. Day 2, I called Douglas Petrie's office. His assistant told me he'd been expecting to hear from me and put me through immediately. Ms. Maddox, he said. I'm glad you called. How are you holding up? I've been better. I wanted to ask about something you said at the reading, the operating agreement. A brief silence. Yes. That's actually why I was hoping you'd reach out. Your mother worked with another attorney on the business side, a woman named Vivienne Hart, out of the law firm Caldwell and Associates in downtown Columbus. Your mother asked me to give you her contact information after the reading. She asked you specifically. She did. About 8 months before she passed. I wrote down the number. Day 3. I met Vivienne Hart in her office on High Street. She was in her mid-50s, sharp, wore reading glasses on a chain, the kind of attorney who has 40 years of case law memorized and doesn't need to look anything up. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Scioto River. My mother had excellent taste in people. Your mother and I spent 7 months designing the ownership structure for Maddox Home Goods, Vivienne said. She slid a document across the desk. This is the operating agreement for the LLC, filed with the state of Ohio 14 months ago. I picked it up. It was thick. Ohio law is clear, she said. When a business is structured as an LLC, the operating agreement governs ownership transfer, not the personal will. The will names your stepfather as beneficiary of 60% of the LLC, but the operating agreement adds conditions to that transfer. What conditions? She opened to a tabbed page. Section 6.4. I'll read it. She put on her glasses. Upon the death of the primary member, ownership interests in the LLC shall transfer to the Kathleen Maddox Legacy Fund, a charitable trust established for the purpose of providing business grants to women-owned small businesses. Unless the surviving spouse demonstrates continued good faith partnership with the decedent's children, as defined in Section 6.5. The air went out of the room. My mother set up a charitable trust. She did, in her name, 12 months ago. It's fully established, fully funded with a seed grant of $20,000, and it's the default beneficiary of the LLC. Vivienne looked up. But it only activates if your stepfather fails to meet the conditions. If he treats you with basic decency, the trust never touches the company. He inherits everything. What are the conditions? She flipped to the next tab. 3 of them. First, permit the decedent's children reasonable access to the family home for the purpose of retrieving personal property and mementos for a period of no less than 90 days following the death. Second, refrain from hostile, dismissive, or exclusionary conduct toward the decedent's children. Third, allow the decedent's children meaningful opportunity to participate in major decisions affecting the business, defined as any transaction exceeding $50,000, for a minimum of 6 months. I thought about the garage code. Changed on day 1, the phone call, her things are my things now. He changed the locks, I said quietly, the day after the will reading. Vivienne nodded slowly. Ms. Maddox, your mother installed a security camera system at the Bexley house 18 months ago. Cloud-based, backed up to a server I have access to. She paused. I've been monitoring, not her private life, only whether the conditions of the operating agreement were being satisfied. I stared at her. She asked me to, Vivienne said simply. She knew exactly what she was doing. Day 4, Aunt Bev called me at 7 in the morning. He's posted the house, she said. What? Zillow. He listed it yesterday. 4.1 million. My mother's garden, 15 years of building. The roses she'd planted the summer after my father left, the vegetable beds she'd dug herself, the patio she'd laid 1 stone at a time on weekends because she said it was meditative. On the market in 4 days. I called Vivienne. I saw it, she said. The house is his. The residential property transferred cleanly through the will. He can sell it. That's not a violation of the operating agreement. But watch for what comes next. Day 6, it came. He called me, not a text, a call, which surprised me. His voice was even, almost friendly. I've been looking at the business, he said. I want to bring in a consultant to assess the product line. There's a lot of dead weight. My mother had built Maddox Home Goods from scratch. Handcrafted kitchen goods, Cutting boards, linens, ceramic pieces sourced from small artisans. Her product line was meticulous. Nothing in it was dead weight. The operating agreement requires you to include me in major business decisions, I said. A pause. I'm sorry. Section 6.5. I'm entitled to participate in any transaction over $50,000 for the first 6 months. His voice cooled. I don't know what you think you read, Laurel, but I own 60% of that company. Subject to the operating agreement. Silence. I suggest you talk to your attorney, I said, and hung up. I was shaking, but I'd said it. Day 8. Aunt Bev came back to Columbus. She showed up at my cousin's apartment with brisket from a place on Broad Street and a printout of the operating agreement she'd made me email her. She read the whole thing at the kitchen table while I sat across from her, eating without tasting anything. Your mother, she said finally, setting down the last page. Your mother built a trap. She built a test, I said. If he'd been decent, he would have passed it. But she knew he wouldn't. I thought about that. I think she hoped she was wrong. But she'd already seen enough to build the contingency. Aunt Bev was quiet for a moment. When did she know? About what he was? I'd been thinking about that. I think she saw it about a year in. He was charming when they met. She was lonely after the divorce. He made her laugh. But at some point, she saw the way he talked about money, the way he looked at the house when he thought she wasn't paying attention, not like it was a home, like it was an asset. So she spent the last year building a legal structure to protect you. She spent the last year building a legal structure to protect what she'd built, including me. Aunt Bev reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. She was the best person I ever knew, she said, and she was also the smartest. Day 10, my stepfather hired a business broker. The broker, a man named something I don't even remember, sent a letter to the company's registered agent, which, per the operating agreement, was Vivienne, expressing interest in listing Maddox home goods for acquisition. Sale price in mind, $3.8 million. Vivienne forwarded me the letter with a single line, he hasn't read section 6.4. Day 12, he tried to move $90,000 from the LLC business account. The company's CFO, a woman named Greta, who'd worked with my mother for 11 years and had a clause in the operating agreement protecting her role, flagged it and called Vivienne. Any disbursement over $50,000 required documented board approval. The operating agreement had a board. He wasn't the board. He didn't know there was a board. Day 14, my stepfather listed my mother's garden furniture on Facebook Marketplace. The teak set she'd saved up for, the cushions she'd had made at a shop in the short north. She used to drink her coffee out there every morning until November, no matter how cold it got. I didn't let myself feel it. I filed it away. Vivienne called me that evening. How are you doing? She asked. I'm getting through it. That's all you have to do right now. How much documentation do we have? 41 violations in 14 days. The garage code, the lock change, the broker letter, the disbursement attempt. Documented instances of dismissive communication. It's substantial. She paused. But I want to give him the full monitoring period. 60 days. When we move, I want it to be so airtight there's nothing to contest. When we move, I repeated. Your mother didn't build this for spectacle. She built it for resolution. Vivienne's voice was careful. She left a letter, by the way. I've been instructed to give it to you at the end of the monitoring period. But I can tell you what she told me when she handed it over. I waited. She said, make sure Laurel knows this was never about punishing him. It was about protecting her. I didn't sleep that night. Day 16, he fired Greta. He called it restructuring. Greta had 31 years of experience in small business finance, had helped my mother navigate 2 recessions, and knew the company's books the way most people know their own handwriting. He fired her because she'd flagged the disbursement. Per the operating agreement, Greta's position was protected for 12 months following a change in ownership. He couldn't fire her without triggering a breach. She called me crying. Your mother made sure, she kept saying. She made sure. Day 19. He hired a contractor to rip out the garden. I found out from a neighbor, Mrs. Ochoa, who'd lived next door for 20 years and had my mother's number in her phone under Kath. She texted me a photo. Backhoe. The roses, gone. The vegetable beds turned over. The patio stones stacked against the fence. I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stood at the window for a while. Aunt Bev called. She didn't say anything when I answered, just waited. "The garden's gone," I said. "I know. Mrs. Ochoa texted me too." "I'm okay." "You don't have to be." "I know." A long quiet. "Your mother grew up with nothing, Laurel. You know that. Her family didn't have a yard. When she got that house, she said it was the first time in her life she'd felt like something was hers. Really hers." Aunt Bev's voice cracked slightly. "She put every piece of herself into that garden." "I know." "And he put a backhoe through it in 19 days." "I know." "Okay." She steadied herself. "Okay. So we're done feeling sad about it, now we're just patient." Day 22. He gave an interview to a Columbus business publication. 2 paragraphs about his plans to modernize Maddox Home Goods and bring fresh vision to a legacy brand. He referred to my mother as the founder and mentioned himself 4 times. Vivienne screenshotted it and sent it to me with the notation, Exhibit 52. Day 25. He tried to terminate the contracts with 3 of the small artisans my mother had worked with for years, a ceramicist in Athens, Ohio, a linen maker in Asheville, a woodworker in Vermont. My mother had written personal contracts with each of them, guaranteed minimums, early termination penalties. The ceramicist called me directly. She was crying. "Your mom sent me a handwritten letter every Christmas," she said. "Every year. She told me she wanted to work together until one of us retired." "I know," I said. "We're going to make this right, I promise." I called Vivian the minute I hung up. "He's trying to break the artisan contracts." I saw the termination notices. Early termination triggers $180,000 in combined penalties under the existing agreements. He doesn't know. She paused. "That's violation number 63. Day 28. His credit card was declined at dinner. I only know because Greta, who is still technically employed per the operating agreement, saw the LLC account activity. He'd been drawing on it for personal expenses, a car lease at $30,400 a month, restaurant tabs, a hotel stay in downtown Columbus that had nothing to do with company business. Vivienne had quietly flagged the account under her fiduciary authority. The card stopped working. I wasn't happy about it exactly, but I wasn't sorry either. Day 31. His attorney called Vivienne. She told me about it that afternoon. She'd had the call on speaker with her paralegal in the room. He said there must be an error in the estate filing, she told me, that his client's access to the company accounts had been improperly restricted. "What did you say?" I said there was no error. I offered to schedule a meeting. I told him to review the operating agreement before we spoke again. She paused. He asked me to send him a copy. He hadn't read it. He's reading it now. Day 35. Vivienne called me to discuss the structure of the meeting. "His attorney will have gone through the document by now. He'll tell your stepfather 2 things. That the operating agreement is valid and supersedes the will for LLC assets, and that they have no viable legal challenge." She set a folder on the desk between us. "We'll meet on day 45. You, me, him, his attorney. I'll present the evidence, and then I'll offer him a choice." "What choice?" She slid 2 documents across, one marked A, one marked B. "Choice A," she said. "He accepts a negotiated settlement. Ohio law for marriages under 5 years, they were married 28 months, provides a framework for spousal support calculations. Given the length of the marriage, the premarital origin of the business assets, and the documentation of misconduct, I've calculated a settlement of $95,000. He signs a full release of claims against the LLC. He signs an NDA. He transfers ownership of his LLC interest back to the trust. He has 60 days to vacate the Bexley property once it sells. He's already listed it, so he's planning to leave anyway. He keeps personal property. And choice B? He declines. He keeps his inherited interests, the residential property he's already selling, and the LLC shares, which transfer to the legacy fund tonight regardless. He can litigate. He'll spend more than the settlement on attorney's fees and lose. Every violation, every dismissed employee, every broken artisan contract, every personal expense pulled from the business account becomes part of the public record. The business publication that just ran his interview will get a very different story. I looked at the two pieces of paper. My mother built this for resolution, I said. She did. Not for punishment. She was very clear about that. Day 40, I drove to Athens to visit the ceramicist. Her studio was a converted barn on the edge of town. She made the kind of pieces that took 3 weeks and couldn't be replicated. Imperfect in ways that were actually perfect. The kind of work my mother had seen immediately and known to support. We drank tea and didn't talk about the legal situation. We talked about my mother. The ceramicist, her name was Frances, she'd been working with my mother for 9 years. Had a box of my mother's letters, she let me read them. I believe in what you make, my mother had written in one. Not because it sells. Because it matters. There's a difference, and most people in this business never figure that out. Day 42, Aunt Bev made dinner. Pot roast, my mother's recipe, the one that takes all day. We sat at Bev's kitchen table in the apartment she'd taken for the month because she refused to go back to Savannah until this was finished, and we ate in the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. How are you feeling? I thought about it honestly. Like I want it to be over, not because I want to win. Just, I want to stop holding all of this. That's appropriate. She refilled my water glass. Grief is a weight. Legal battles are a weight. You've been carrying both. Mom would have hated this. Your mother would have hated him getting away with it more. I laughed. It surprised me. That's exactly what she would have said. I know, I've known her for 58 years. The meeting was at 2 o'clock in Vivienne's conference room. My stepfather arrived 8 minutes late in a suit that was slightly too formal for the situation, his attorney beside him. A real estate litigator, the kind who defaults to aggression. I'd done enough research to know he was expensive and not especially experienced in LLC dispute law. Vivienne and I were already seated. I wasn't planning to speak unless necessary. Thank you for coming, Vivienne said without warmth but without hostility. My stepfather looked at me, then away. This is unnecessary, he said. The will was clear. The will was clear about the residential property, Vivienne said. It was not clear about the LLC, because wills don't govern LLC assets in Ohio. Operating agreements do. She slid the document across the table. This is the operating agreement for Maddox Home Goods LLC, filed with the state of Ohio 14 months before your wife's death. His attorney picked it up, started reading. His expression shifted within 60 seconds. Section 6.4, Vivienne said and read it aloud. My stepfather's face went carefully, deliberately blank. The kind of blank that means someone is working very hard to not react. This is, she never mentioned. She mentioned it in the will, Vivienne said quietly. Stanley Petrie read the provision aloud. Subject to the terms of the operating agreement. Did you hear that? Silence. You were looking at your phone, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. He turned to me. For the first time he looked uncertain. Vivienne opened a binder. Section 6.5, the conditions for satisfying the trust contingency. 3 requirements. Reasonable access to the family home. You changed the locks on day 1. She slid the ring camera transcript across the table. He didn't reach for it. Refrain from hostile or exclusionary conduct. She slid more documents, witness statements from Greta, from the artisans, bank records, the Facebook Marketplace listing of the garden furniture 4 days after the funeral, and meaningful participation in major business decisions. You attempted to draw $90,000 from the account without board consultation. You engaged a broker to sell the company without notice, and you attempted to terminate contracts carrying $180,000 in early termination penalties. Each page landed like something solid. His attorney was reading intently. He leaned over and said something quietly to my stepfather, who didn't respond. "How many violations?" the attorney asked Vivienne, not looking up. 68, documented over 35 days. Dated, witnessed, or recorded. My stepfather looked up at me. His voice, when it came, was strange, stripped of the smoothness. "Your mother set me up." "My mother set up a test," I said. "She built a structure that assumed good faith. If you'd been decent, if you'd let me in to get her things, if you'd included me in business conversations, if you'd treated her company like something worth honoring, the trust would never have activated. Vivienne would have certified compliance. You would have inherited everything." He stared at me. "You could have had it all," I said. "You just had to be kind." His attorney cleared his throat. "What's the offer?" Vivienne slid the 2 documents forward. She read them the same way she'd read them to me. Choice A, the settlement, $95,000, full release. NDA, 60 days to transition out of the property he was already selling. Choice B, litigation, public record, the business publication story, the artisan contracts, Greta's wrongful termination claim, all of it aired in an Ohio courtroom. "The Legacy Fund assumes ownership of the LLC tonight at midnight," Vivienne said. "That's already determined. The only question is whether he leaves with $95,000 and his privacy, or with nothing and the public record of what he did." My stepfather's attorney was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I need 15 minutes with my client." Vivienne stood. "Of course." We waited in the hallway. Aunt Bev had texted me 12 times. I didn't read them. I just looked at the river through the window at the end of the corridor. Vivienne stood beside me. "You did well in there." "I just told the truth. That's all it ever takes." 15 minutes became 20. Then the door opened. My stepfather's attorney came into the hallway alone. He looked tired. "He'll take choice A," he said. I nodded. We went back inside. My stepfather signed the documents without looking at me. His hands were steady. I'll give him that. When it was done, Vivienne walked him and his attorney to the elevator. I stayed in the conference room and looked at the river. She came back and poured 2 glasses of water. "Your mother left a letter," she said. She set an envelope on the table. My name, in my mother's handwriting. She asked me to give it to you today, whatever today ended up being. I picked it up, didn't open it yet. "She was certain," Vivienne said quietly. "She didn't hope this would happen. She was certain it would." She knew him. She knew herself better. She knew she'd built something worth protecting. And she knew you were worth protecting. She paused. "She talked about you constantly. In every meeting we had. You. Your work. What you'd been through. What you deserved." I pressed my hand flat on the envelope. At midnight, I got an email from Vivienne. Effective 12:00 a.m., ownership of Maddox Home Goods LLC has transferred to the Kathleen Maddox Legacy Fund. You have been named as founding trustee. Welcome to your mother's legacy. I was sitting on the floor of my cousin's guest room, back against the bed frame, and I read that sentence 4 times. Then I opened the letter. It was 2 pages, front and back, my mother's handwriting that I'd known since before I could read. She talked about the company. What it had cost her. What it had given her. What she wanted it to become. She talked about the artisans. She talked about Greta. She talked about small things. The ceramicist's Christmas pieces. The smell of the linen samples when a new shipment came in. The way she felt on the mornings when she drove to the warehouse and walked through it and knew that every item on every shelf had been made by someone she believed in. And then, near the end, "I didn't build this to take anything from anyone. I built it because I needed to know that when I was gone, it would land somewhere safe. I needed to know you would be okay. Not rich, okay. There's a difference. You've always known the difference, even when you were small. That's how I know you'll take care of what I'm leaving you. Not because it's valuable, because it matters. Be kind to people, Laurel, even the ones who weren't kind to us. Not because they deserve it, because you do. I sat there for a long time. Aunt Bev knocked on the door around 1 in the morning. I hadn't called her and she hadn't texted. She just knew. "It's done," she said from the doorway. "It's done." She came in and sat on the floor next to me, and we didn't say anything for a while. 3 weeks later, I hired Greta back. Formally as CFO of the Legacy Fund, with a proper contract and a salary that matched what she deserved. She cried on the phone. I did too. I called Frances, the ceramicist, told her the contracts were intact, that we wanted to grow, not shrink, that my mother had believed in what she made, and I was my mother's daughter. "I know you are," she said. "I could always see it in how she talked about you." 2 months after the will reading, I sat in what was now my office, a small room above the warehouse on the east side of Columbus. Walls covered with samples and photos, and the original business plan my mother had written by hand in 1998. I'd framed it. We'd helped 4 women-owned small businesses in Columbus with the first round of Legacy Fund grants, $40,000, split between a bakery, a textile studio, a landscape architecture firm run by 2 sisters, and a woman who'd spent 3 years building a custom furniture business from her garage. They were exactly the kind of people my mother would have believed in immediately. Aunt Bev still called every Sunday. She'd gone back to Savannah finally, but she threatened regularly to come back. The house in Bexley sold, eventually, to a family with 3 kids who'd already asked the realtor if the garden could be restored. Mrs. Ochoa texted me when they moved in. "They planted roses," she wrote. "Your mom would have liked them." I drove to the cemetery on a Saturday in November, the kind of cold Ohio day that turns the sky flat and silver. My mother is buried in a section near the edge where you can see a sliver of water through the trees if the light hits right. She would have picked it if she'd been picking. I sat on the grass and talked to her. About the fund. About Frances. About Greta. About the bakery owner who'd sent me a handwritten note after receiving the grant. About the family in Bexley. The new roses. About the letter. I told her I'd read it probably 30 times. And at the end, I said, "You built something that held. Even after you were gone. That's not nothing. That's everything." The wind moved through the trees. The light was low and thin and honest. I had a board meeting on Monday, grant applications to review. A call with a ceramicist in Athens about expanding her production line. Work to do, all of it hers, now mine, now both. I stood up, brushed the grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. Some people build for ownership. My mother built for legacy. She knew the difference. She taught me the difference. And I'm spending the rest of my life proving I learned it. I keep thinking about the garden. 15 years of work, gone in an afternoon because someone with a backhoe decided it was in the way. That's what greed looks like up close. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a machine turning over something beautiful because the person holding the controls never understood what it was worth. My stepfather wasn't evil in the way villains are evil in movies. He was afraid. He saw money, and he grabbed at it, the way people grab when they've never trusted that there will be enough. I understand that fear. I felt versions of it. But fear doesn't excuse what you choose to do with it. He chose to change the locks the day after the will reading. He chose to fire a woman who'd given 11 years to a company she believed in. He chose to list my mother's garden furniture 4 days after her funeral. Those weren't accidents. Those were decisions, made one at a time, and they built his outcome the same way my mother's decisions built hers. That's the thing nobody talks about when they talk about karma or consequences or justice. It's not lightning from the sky, it's accumulation. Every small choice either holds weight or shifts it. My stepfather made 68 documented choices in 35 days, and each one moved him further from everything he thought he'd secured. My mother made choices over 14 months, careful, deliberate, unglamorous legal work, and each one held. The structure she built didn't collapse when she was gone. That's not luck. That's what happens when your decisions come from something real, instead of something desperate. My mother had a kind of moral clarity I'm still learning to match. Not moral rigidity, She wasn't righteous, she wasn't preachy. She just knew the difference between what was hers to keep and what was hers to give. She knew that the ceramicist in Athens mattered, that Greta mattered, that the women who would eventually receive those legacy fund grants mattered, even though she'd never meet them. She built for them anyway. That's a particular kind of goodness that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up in the contracts you write and the people you protect and the letters you leave behind. And the intelligence she brought to it. I mean that plainly, not as a compliment but as a fact. She read every clause. She thought 14 months ahead. She anticipated exactly how someone operating from fear and entitlement would behave. And she built a legal structure that accounted for it. She didn't hope for the best. She planned for the truth. There's a lesson in that I'm still unpacking. That wisdom isn't just knowing people. It's building systems that can hold even when the people disappoint you. What I carry forward, though, is the harder part, the staying power of it. I spent months living on an air mattress in my cousin's guest room, watching someone dismantle everything my mother had built, and I had to learn to be patient when every instinct said to fight louder. Aunt Bev kept telling me, patience isn't passive. She was right. It was the most active thing I did, holding steady, documenting, trusting the structure my mother had already built, not collapsing under the weight of grief and injustice at the same time. The Legacy Fund has helped 4 businesses now. Next quarter it'll be more. Frances is expanding her ceramics line. Greta runs the books the way she always did, careful and exact. And somewhere in Columbus, a family planted roses in a yard that used to hold my mother's garden. She built something that held. That's the whole story. And I'm still figuring out how to deserve it.